Hello, welcome to episode 27 of Beyond the Box. Trayvon Hastings, Joey Korzanowski with me as always. We're finally almost to that time. The NFL draft right around the corner Thursday. But before we talk about the NFL draft and some of the continuously ongoing things that continue to get reported in certain places, you guys can take that hint for what it is. We're going to talk about the NBA playoffs first. We didn't get a chance to do a preview before these game ones took place. Now we're going to give our recap of these game ones, what are the storylines, but then also for the rest of these series in round one, what is going to be the difference makers, what sticks out to us, and with that in mind, I'm going to throw it right to Joey because he just we'll say pre-show, just made a interesting prediction. Now he calls it a little bit of an overreaction, not a crazy one, but let's hear it.
Yeah, I think the Pistons are going to lose the series. I really don't like to overreact to game ones, but I really don't feel like this is an overreaction. I just think that the way that the Pistons play stylistically, I think they're just very prone to be upset. The Magic shot 60% from two. They had all five starters in double figures. They won the rebounding battle. They won the turnover battle. They had half the free throws the Pistons did. I think the Magic, everybody kind of wrote them off after that play-in loss to the 76ers, but they might have purposely lost because they wanted to get the Pistons in round one as opposed to playing Boston in round one. So I can't necessarily blame them there. But look, the Pistons, I think they'll bounce back in game two. But when this goes to Orlando, the Magic are going to be a tough out for the Pistons because I just think they match up perfectly with them. The Magic have three guys listed at 6'10 in Wendell Carter, Franz Wagner, and Paolo Banchero. As for the Pistons, they've just got Jalen Duren at 6'10. That's it. Other than that, Duncan Robinson's like 6'7. I think All Star is like 6'7. Tobias Harris is around the same size. So the Magic have more size. They can be just as physical as the Pistons. I know we think of the Pistons as this tough, gritty, physical team, but that's the Magic. And the Magic have playoff experience as well from the last couple of years. So I think this very well could be an upset that we have brewing on our hands here.
My thoughts on this series in particular, we had posted our graphic, which was, who we had throughout the entirety of the playoffs, but then we posted a second graphic, which was our round one predictions. So how many games do we think each series was going? I personally feel like this Pistons Magic series will go at least 6 games. I have Detroit winning it 4-2, and that's not even necessarily meant to be a slight on Detroit. It's more so complimentary of Orlando, I personally feel like, because if you look at both of these teams, 1 through 5, just on paper, their rotations, you can make the case Orlando has more talent. And I think everybody was expecting them to take a step forward this year and be in that top four of the conference. I certainly envisioned that happening. And surprisingly, the Eastern Conference from top to bottom was better than the West this year. And I don't mean at the top with the 61 teams, I just mean the depth of it, as this is the first time in I think a long time every team that made the playoffs in the Eastern Conference had an above 500 record. The Orlando Magic are actually 8 games over 500. They're 45 and 37. I would say based off the expectations, that win total might feel a little low, but reality is I thought this team would hover close to 50 wins, and well, 45 is fairly close to 50. So this is a Magic team that when all gears are on, all gears are turning. This is a very tough team to beat. And we've mentioned in years past the backbone of this team is their defense. And we actually saw that on display a little bit in game one, despite it really being abysmal throughout the regular season. Paolo Banchero has redeemed himself after the immense backlash he got in the first play-in game. He has definitely rebounded as he should have and needed to in those following 2 games, the second play-in game and then also game one against the Pistons. But his playoff numbers are actually pretty good. I mean, he averages almost 28 points a game. I think his rebounds are almost 8, assists almost over 5 or 6. So, like, he actually statistically is a riser in the playoffs if you look at his regular season stats in comparison to his postseason stats. But despite that, that's not really the takeaway for me. The takeaway was the fact that Cade Cunningham took, I think, 27 shots and Jalen Duren only took 4. That's not a winning formula. And frankly, if you're Jalen Duren, this is the type of series you need to be maybe not necessarily the focal point of the Pistons offense, but you do need to be taking probably between 12 and 16 shots. You're playing down low, the combination of Goga Badatse, Mo Wagner, and Wendell Carter. And only one of those players is reliable defensively like that, and that's Badatse. And then if they want to go small, if Orlando wants to go small, they can throw Jonathan Isaac on Jalen Duren. But despite that, this should be the type of series that Jalen Duren just flourishes in. It's a similar thing I was talking to you about last week. We were texting back and forth, and I mentioned, well, the Lakers, I think we're going to see a lot of Jackson Hayes because he's the type of big that thrives by LeBron with Luka and Reeves out. But then I also said, however, they need Aiton's offense because Şengün isn't necessarily a stout defender. Like I think it's a good series for Ayton to go off and be productive, and that was evident in Game One for the Lakers when he had a double double, had I think 16 and 10. Lakers now moved to 19 and 4 on the season when DeAndre Ayton double doubles. They also improved to 23 and 3 on the season when he takes 10 or more shots. So the reality is when DeAndre Ayton is locked in, he's getting his touches, he's productive offensively. This is a team in Los Angeles who is probably going to get the win and get the job done. But going back to Detroit and Orlando, I do think this will at least be a 6 game series. It's not going to surprise me at all. Cade can have all the points he wants there, and I like what Orlando did. They let Cade have his due. They let him have his near 40 ball, and they basically defended everybody else. I mean, it was a very, very good performance from them. And the only other player in double figures was Tobias Harris with 17. So I think if you're Orlando and you know, your takeaway in game one, if you could foreshadow it, was hey, you get the win in game one, but Cade Cunningham has 39 points. I think they'll be happy with it. And I think if you add in, oh, Tobias Harris was second with 17 points, no one else scored double figures, you'll be pretty happy with it. If you're the Pistons, you would think you win a game that Cade has 39 points in. Like you said, it's maybe a little bit of an overreaction. I'm not going to look too much into it because it's one game, but they do need to rebound here in game two because that's going to be very indicative of how this series plays out moving forward.
Yeah, I drew a comparison, and I really want to get your thoughts on this. So you remember the Cavs Pacers series last year, right? Where the Pacers team was a lot better going into it than what we gave them credit for. And I'm not saying that the Pacers last year are going to be this year's Magic, not by any means, but the Pacers came in against that Cavs team. The Cavs probably thought they were better, and I think they were just a terrible matchup for the Cavs. The Cavs were very reliant on Donovan Mitchell. You didn't get a ton out of your true center in Jared Allen. I think I draw a lot of parallels to this game here. The Pistons are too reliant on Cade Cunningham. As we've said, Jalen Duren only gave you 8 points and 7 rebounds out of your starting center, who averages way more than that. I mean, that's just not going to be good enough. He only had 4 shots. And on top of that, the Pistons just don't have the bench pieces to come in and support that and to be like a spark plug. Dennis Jenkins was phenomenal to end the year, especially when Cade was hurt. He was 1 for 7 from the field, 1 for 6 from three. Only had 6 points. I mean, it was the highest out of anybody on their bench. But Isaiah Stewart, your backup big, comes in and just isn't going to provide much. So I draw a lot of comparisons from this game one loss for the Pistons to the Cavs game one loss to the Pacers last year. Now remember, the Cavs had a couple of opportunities to bounce back in that series. I actually do think if the Cavs hadn't had that historical choke in game two to the Pacers and went down 0-2 going back into Indiana, I actually think the Cavs would have had a chance to win. So this game two is going to be really, really big for Detroit. I mean, I know every game in the playoff is a must win, but if they lose game two, the series is over for sure. Down two, going back to Orlando, chalk it up. So again, I don't want to say that the Magic are going to win in five and they're going to go make a finals run like the Pistons or like the Pacers did last year. But I do see a lot of similarities between the two series where I can absolutely see the Magic just kind of replicating the same formula game in and game out, and it leads to a series win.
Yeah, and building off of that, we have talked about previously. We like JB Bickerstaff. We think JB
Hmm.
Bickerstaff is a quality coach in the NBA. Definitely in the top half of coaches in the league. You could probably argue higher than that, but conservatively saying top half. But you, being a Cavs fan and witnessing JB Bickerstaff, you've also highlighted the fact that when it comes to the playoffs, there's certain deficiencies in his ability, coaching wise, that you would argue led to the eventual demise of the Cavs in several of the last few playoff years. Whereas I would argue maybe it's how the Cavs roster is constructed and how it is built, with the combination of sure the coaching aspect. But in saying that, I do think this is I don't want to say a make or break series for JB Bickerstaff, but it's definitely going to affect the status quo on him and basically he's one of those guys that's like a transition. We think in like the NFL, we think of a bridge quarterback, somebody who can come in for 2 years, be stable at the position, offers some sort of stability for the team at the position. And JB Bickerstaff is kind of if they lose this series, and I think for me this is my status quo of him anyway, but he's kind of that transitional coach that can take you out from the depths of hell, we'll say, basketball hell, and he can take you out of that into competitiveness, but he's not going to be a coach you win a championship with. You've got to pivot off of him to then go get somebody else. That's kind of how I view him. I would be curious what your thoughts are on it, and I'm sure you might agree for the most part, but I think Orlando's just a tough matchup. I think Orlando would be a tough matchup for any of the top four seeds. I think Orlando would be more competitive than Toronto's going to be with Cleveland. I would argue Orlando is going to be more competitive with Boston than Philadelphia is going to be. And we got a glimpse of that series last year with Paolo, and we also have seen Paolo against the Cavs 2 years ago. So, and then obviously the Pistons, we're seeing that right now, and the Knicks. I think Orlando could definitely match the physicality of New York, and they could throw a lot of guys at Brunson and make his life very much a pain. So, I just think Orlando's a tough matchup. I do think if there's a lower seeded team that can maybe make a run, make some noise, Orlando could be one of those teams. If Embiid was playing, I would say Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is, not getting Joel Embiid right now. So, and you can't say the Hornets because despite how hot they were to end the year, they failed when it mattered most. So, I think all eyes are definitely on that 1-8 for sure. Also because, and this is the other storyline piece, but there was only one game in all of round one so far in the game ones that was inside of 10 points, and that was the Lakers beating the Rockets by 9. When the reality was Lakers were basically up 11-13 late into the game, fourth quarter. Houston got a couple of late baskets, and that was that. So the Lakers controlled that game from start to finish. LeBron, and I'll say LeBron and the bench boys did the deed in game one, and that's a huge win for them, especially with Kevin Durant out. So I think there's a couple different storylines to monitor. One being Detroit and Orlando, the other being Los Angeles and Houston. Because if the Lakers can't extend this series far enough and potentially win it, you could potentially get at least one of Reeves or Luca back in the ensuing rounds. And that then leaves a bigger question of where does Houston go now? Because you got Kevin Durant to try to be a conference finals team at least, and you're getting eliminated in the first round to a Luca and Austin Reevesless LeBron James led Lakers team. So I want to get your thoughts on that series as well. I don't think the other ones really had a lot of storylines. Portland made a late run against San Antonio, but they still pulled away for the win. The Thunder did the Thunder. Celtics did the Celtics. The Knicks, I know you picked Atlanta, but I picked the Knicks. But the Knicks looked very good as well against the Hawks. Jalen Brunson started the game 8 of 11, finished 1 of 11. So that's something to monitor moving forward. But let me hear your thoughts on some of the other series. What sticks out to you?
Yeah, an interesting point with this Rockets Lakers series. Look, I'm not sure how long Kevin Durant's going to be out, but without Kevin Durant, this Rockets team is no different than they were last year, and the team is just not going to go far in the playoffs. They had Fred VanVleet last year. They do not have him this year. I mean, Reed Shepard took 14 threes. I know that's kind of his game, but if you only make 5 of them, I mean, the Lakers are a team that they do not have the best paint defense. So I'm honestly kind of surprised that when I picked Houston, I thought Kevin Durant was going to play. All signs had pointed to that, so it was kind of a surprise out. But I look at Houston, and this is just a team that should easily out physical the Lakers, especially when they're down Reeves and Luca. I mean, I'm just kind of amazed at this. The Laker defense was not good. They kept running that drop coverage, and the Lakers just completely picked it apart. So I don't know if I necessarily feel about this game one loss the way that I do kind of the Pistons. Obviously, this is a much different scenario, but like Alperen Sengun, 6 of 19 against DeAndre Ayton. Ayton was 8 of 10 for himself, and me personally, I've kind of haven't been the biggest DeAndre Ayton guy. I was a little critical of the Lakers going out and getting him. I thought that they definitely could have done better. But if he's going to play like this in the playoffs, he's going to give you 19 and 11 on 80% shooting. The Lakers will take that night in and night out. So I think this is going to be an interesting series to watch. I'll see what kind of adjustments the Rockets make because, obviously, you just simply have to shoot better. I mean, Sengun can't go 6 of 19. Shepard can't go 6 of 20. I mean, shout out though, Tari Eason, 16 and 10 off the bench, didn't miss a shot. They could definitely use a little bit more of him. But, kind of in the same way, the Lakers, it was balanced. All five starters hit double figures. Luke Kennard was big with 27 points. We'll see if he can replicate that. But LeBron playing that facilitator role, I think at this stage in his career is just so lethal. I mean, he sees the floor unlike anybody else. 13 assists. I think he had like 8 in the first quarter. It was something ridiculous like that. So if LeBron's going to continue to distribute like this, and Luke Kennard's going to continue to knock down shots, I mean, the Lakers very well, could pull off what would be an upset. And then you pointed out the Knicks Hawks series. I did pick the Hawks. I'm not wavering from my pick. I liked, honestly, I'll take a moral victory here. I like the way that the Hawks hung around in game one. I know the Knicks kind of pulled away late, but Jalen Brunson got off to a scorching hot start. Karl Anthony Towns got going a little bit later on in the game. I don't think that series is over at all. I think the Hawks are still very well alive. If they can get game two, I think it's going to be an interesting series, but I do not think you can count out the Hawks just yet. I still think that they have a balanced enough attack. This is probably one of the better Hawks teams that they've had in years, and that's without Trey Young, which I think is kind of surprising. But I think they're deep enough, and they've got enough weapons that they can kind of go toe to toe with the Knicks. So yeah, two series that are definitely going to come down to the wire between the Lakers, Rockets, and then the Knicks, Hawks.
I do think those are really the only series to keep note of, and we'll try to touch base on them as much as we can. We're not going to be able to roll out a second NBA playoffs related podcast this week, though, because we are going to now move forward about 17 minutes in. We're going to take this thing to the NFL draft, and we're going to talk about everything that's transpired in the offseason thus far. Team needs, some of the moves that have been made, rumors that continue to go out about A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles, and the what seems to be inevitable trade to the Patriots. But what are some storylines maybe that you are taking note of? You can take this from your favorite team, the Browns perspective, or just some sort of prospect. Like, you really like this prospect, you think he's going to move up boards, this guy might move down boards. What maybe some names to watch? What's going to stick out to you come Thursday in this NFL draft?
Well, yeah, I think the Browns are really affected by the Giants trade. The Giants traded away Dexter Lawrence, picked up the 10th pick. They now have 2 picks in the top 10. And I think that's going to make things really interesting because they're now 2 picks ahead of the Giants, and the Commanders have a pick ahead of, ahead of the Cowboys, and the Commanders have a pick ahead of the Cowboys. So I think if one of these defensive players falls to 6, reports have already come out that the Browns are looking to trade down. I buy it. I think Andrew Berry is only going to trade down if he gets a good haul in return. He's not going to take a trade that's kind of even, 50-50 to trade back. He will only take that trade if he's really gaining something like we saw last year. What owner is going to throw him more than Jerry Jones? Because we know how Jerry Jones, we know him and his ego, for better or for worse. He wants to go up and get one of these big defensive game changer guys, and I don't blame him. I would too. So I think he would be willing to overpay. Obviously, they have the 2 first-round picks at 12 and 20. So if Caleb Downs or a Sonny Styles falls down to 6, I would expect the Cowboys to be all over that because Sonny Styles is not falling to 7. If he go past 7, I should say, because if he goes to 7, the Commanders are taking him absolutely. So I think there is a good chance of that happening because Mendoza's going to go 1. I think Arvell Reese or one of these edge rushers will go 2 to the Jets. There's some smoke between Jeremiah Love and the Cardinals at 3. I think that very well could happen. Carnell Tate is still very much in the mix to go early there, maybe to the Titans, although they spent a little bit of money on receivers, so maybe they go O-line, or who knows, with Robert Saleh, maybe they go defense and they snag, say, a Caleb Downs or something. So I think this is going to be interesting because this draft, it's really wide open if you think about it. After Mendoza, we don't even know what the Jets are going to do too. They have the entire board ahead of them, and we just assume, hey, maybe they'll take Arvell Reese. Nobody really knows quite yet, right? So I do think the Giants having that 10th pick, I do think that kind of strongholds the Browns. If they stay at 6, I think they're going to take a receiver. But again, that's under the assumption that they like Carnell Tate enough. Say they can feel like they can move back a couple of spots and still get a guy like Jordan Tyson. That's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I think in terms of just prospects alone, I think Jordan Tyson is going to be the most intriguing to see where he goes because he had the injury history, but apparently the pro day went well. Saw some videos. Apparently he looked good. I could see a team definitely reaching on him. The Eagles at 23. I'll be interested to note if he falls that far, but I can see another team maybe in the teens going after Jordan Tyson.
I think I'll give a name that I think probably value wise, or in terms of once these players are on their teams, will be a little bit more like, man, why didn't we draft him? Caden McDonald from Ohio State. And I'm not saying this as an Ohio State fan. I'm saying this as somebody who's watched a lot of Caden McDonald because he was at Ohio State. But I just envision him being somebody who, from a talent perspective or on draft boards, is better than the very late 20s into the second round. I think he honestly should be around 20, somewhere between, like 15 to 22 maybe, but a little bit higher. I think Kaden McDonald's gonna make whoever drafts him like gonna make bank for that individual, for that front office, and that team. But that's a name of somebody who I've just noticed has kind of just been floating around on the back end of the draft boards. I think it's somebody who has a lot of value, for sure, 100%. In terms of like the sliders in the draft, it's a little bit harder to uh, pick somebody. Obviously, I think with what you mentioned on Jordan Tyson, maybe that is the answer, uh, for sure. I mean, with some of the injury history and various things, we see how that can affect teams and what selections they choose. But looking at the overall board, like, you're right, we don't know what the Jets are going to do. For the longest time, it felt like they were going to take one of David Bailey or Arvell Reese, and I believe a couple weeks ago they had a top 30 visit scheduled for David Bailey, and it got canceled, I think, which would indicate they want to go Arvell Reese, but it also could indicate that they're open to trading down. And if they were open to trading down, that is something I think they could take advantage of because they have a lot of team needs. But uh, the Giants are definitely the team to monitor in that top 10 because they do have two of those top 10 picks now. But I think it changes what they might do. I've seen a lot of mocks put Jeremiah Love there. I don't personally like that. I don't think they should do that. I think there's much bigger components to their team that they need to focus on before running back. Um, Most mocks I've seen have Jeremiah Love going to the Titans, actually, which I think I hate even more because they have two quality backs in Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. So I'm not a fan of that one either. So I'll be curious to see where Jeremiah Love falls. I think the best fit for him in the top 10 is going to be the Saints or the Commanders, just purely off of need. But I think for a team like the Giants, I think they take one of the Ohio State defenders at 5, and I personally would take receiver at 10. But the Giants could go two defensive picks, right? Like they could take Mansour Delane at 10, and they could take Arvo Reese, or not Arvo Reese, because he's probably not going to be there, but Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs at 5. Or if Downs was there at 10, you take Downs at 10 and you take Styles at 5, or vice versa. So I think the Giants hit the just complete swing of a home run on that trade. You traded a guy who clearly wanted out, wasn't going to re-sign, and Dexter Lawrence, and I think you got probably what I would call peak value for him, which is the 10th pick in the draft. And then the Bengals re-signed him to a 1-year, $28 million contract extension. And we can talk about the Bengals on this for a second now because this is the same team that tried to avoid paying T. Higgins forever and has tried to avoid paying, or did avoid paying a guy like Trey Hendrickson, right? But they go get Dexter Lawrence and they can so freely just give money to Dexter Lawrence. So I guess I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that. It is just a 1 year extension, $28 million, but the impact he can have on what is usually a very susceptible Bengals defense and how he can impact them on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I like the trade a lot. Actually, I'm not gonna lie. I like it for both sides. I think the like you said, peak value. The Giants got a peak value for Dexter Lawrence, but for the Bengals, I think it's worth it. Like this is the league worst rushing defense in the Bengals last year. They gave up almost 150 yards on the ground per game. That can't happen again. So you go out and you get a beast on the defensive line. I saw that the Browns were interested in trading for Dexter Lawrence. They were offering up a second round pick. I said, please, if the Giants are willing to accept that, oh my God, send it over now. But obviously, they got what they felt was a better value in the first round pick. So I look at the Bengals here. This is a team that wants to win now, right? So Dexter Lawrence aligns exactly with their timeline of, hey, we got to go all in this year, right? And I know they didn't necessarily want to pay Trey Hendrickson, which I didn't mind. He was asking for a lot of money, but they do have Dexter Lawrence under contract for a couple of years, I believe. So he's going to be a Bengal for the foreseeable future. It's a little bit on the older side, but this is a dude who is extremely productive. I know everybody points out the sack numbers from last year, which I don't. If you're bringing up sack numbers in a defensive tackle argument, I think you're on the complete wrong side of the argument. Well, look, this is a guy who's going to be a run stopper. It's exactly what the Bengals need. They had to make adjustments on their offensive line. And I think if the Bengals were picking at 10, who were they going to get? They were going to need to draft somebody on defense. Was Caleb Downs going to fall to 10? I don't think so. Was Sonny Styles going to fall to 10? I don't think so. Was David Bailey going to fall to 10? Arvell Reese? It's not looking like it. So maybe you could reach on a guy like Ruben Bain at 10 if you were really big in him, but you just took Shamar Stewart last year. So obviously you're hoping Shamar Stewart can take a second year leap and get better as an edge rusher. So I think this makes a lot of sense for both sides. I think the Bengals probably get the best player that they possibly could out of this situation. I think Dexter Lawrence is better than any defensive player they were going to draft at 10. And I think the Giants gave up a guy that they didn't want to pay, and they got a lot of value out of it. So I like this a lot for both sides, actually.
Yeah, I think it was overall the rare win-win, right? We thought the Tyrese Halliburton Demonis Sabonis trade was going to be a win-win for two small market teams, and unfortunately, it was a win-win. I think for the Pacers long term, and a win-win in the very short term for the Kings with Sabonis, and that's a little bit unrelated because different sport, but similar idea. Uh, Looking at our two teams, I think this is where our bread and butter is going to be because these are the teams we monitor most. But the Browns have two first round picks. Um, we talked about literally a few hours ago, the AJ Brown stuff that continues to get reported and now is getting spewed across every media outlet now about how it's almost inevitable and very likely that post June 1, the Eagles will trade AJ Brown to the Patriots. And the Eagles then will have to split up his $40 million cap hit over 2 seasons. And I have always stuck on this same statement I'm about to make, which is that it just financially makes no sense for the Eagles to do this. They were in the same predicament if they weren't able to re-sign Dallas Goedert, because had he left, went somewhere else, it's actually $20 million in dead cap because of the way the Eagles structured his contract. So bringing AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert back on to the 2026 version of the Eagles actually is the best thing financially for them. But obviously they got Goddard. That took Kenyon Sadiq off the board more than likely for the Eagles. I know there was a lot of mocks putting him there. I don't personally see the Eagles ever drafting tight end in round one, despite how versatile Sadiq is. He is a freak of nature, but I don't even know if he's going to be there at 23 when the Eagles pick. But the Eagles are going to operate this draft, it sounds like. I credit Jeff Darlington from ESPN on this, but it sounds like they're going to operate this draft as if they're trading AJ Brown, which I'm not necessarily against. I think that makes sense to do. I'm just against the idea of trading AJ Brown to begin with, because what are you going to realistically get back that's going to impact your team? And a lot of the mocks say, second round pick, conditional second round pick. There's a specific trade I've mentioned with you, a very specific trade that I think works for the Eagles. I don't think it'll ever happen for a multitude of reasons, but I think they need to get a current right now impact player, someone who can come in and still help their team while still getting draft capital. So in saying that, there's a particular guy who is available, technically still on a roster, and has not been with that roster basically all year. And that guy is Brandon Ayuk, who I'm not necessarily a big fan of, but the reality is Brandon Ayuk is probably going to step in this year and be more productive than whatever receiver you take in rounds 2, 3, or 4. I don't think the Eagles take receiver in round one. So you get Ayuk and say you get a third and a fifth, or I don't know, fourth and a fifth, or something like that. I just think it makes a lot more sense than just getting a second round pick back and then knowing you have to hit on that pick, or you trade that pick for something else in the future. I just don't necessarily agree with the ideology of it. But I think this is why the Eagles traded for Dontavian Wicks last week, because he's somebody who has shown some flashes in Green Bay's offense, their very crowded receiver room, and he's somebody who I think would be a great receiver 3. I don't know if I'd like him as a receiver 2, but not really the point, because the Eagles now have signed 3 different veterans to compete in the receiver room. Elijah Moore, Hollywood Brown, they have Dontavian Wicks now, so they have much more known commodities in the back half of the receiver room than they have for the last few years. And obviously, it's the big 2026, and we're still trying to talk about Hollywood Brown and Elijah Moore. I understand that part, but they're better options than what some of the Eagles' receiver 3s and 4s have been the last few years. So I do think Devontae Smith will emerge into that receiver 1 spot perfectly fine. He's done it before. He's basically been a receiver 1 for the Eagles as well for the last few years, because they've had 2 receiver 1s, I would argue. But I'm unsure on the idea of trading AJ Brown. And you have shared thoughts about, the suitors, and somebody's got to want him.
Yeah, it's just when the report comes out, it's that yep, the Patriots are into AJ Brown. That's like the only team you hear of, and it's like Diana Rossini breaking, and you're like, oh, all right, well that's kind of interesting. But no, I mean I feel like there'd be other teams that would be willing to give up more. I think the 49ers are interesting. I don't know that they would necessarily do that well. I do think they would like to dump Brandon Ayuk and kind of move on from that situation. But would they really want to give up some more picks to go and get an expensive receiver when they already went out and signed Mike Evans and you have Ricky Pearsall? So I don't know. I would like to see that. I think AJ Brown on a Kyle Shanahan offense would be a lot of fun. See the way they use him with Brock Purdy. I think that would be cool to see. Doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. Historically, the Browns would kind of be all over this sort of thing. Andrew Berry, loves trading for his veteran wide receivers. Obviously went and got Amari Cooper, went and got Elijah Moore, went and got Jerry Jeudy. But this just feels a little bit different with them. I don't think the Browns really want to part with a lot of their draft capital, and I know they want to stay on the younger side and kind of build for the future, which I totally get. So outside of the Patriots, I really don't know what kind of teams really come to mind. I think maybe the Raiders, if they want to go and get their rookie quarterback, a new wide receiver 1. But again, I feel like they'd be more inclined to they spent a lot of their cap space on kind of their roster, guys that they brought in now. So I feel like they'd be more inclined to just draft a rookie wide receiver. So I don't know. I do think it's going to be interesting, but a team like the Patriots just does kind of make sense. You got a young quarterback. You feel like you need to make a big move to get over the hump, to get back to where you were last year, and going and upgrading at a position of need, I think is a good way to do that. Now, my only thing is AJ Brown. He is getting older. We did see the play take a slight hit last year. I've been a big fan of AJ Brown. I like the physicality he plays with. I like a big body receiver to play outside. Really is a true wide receiver 1, kind of a bully with the ball in his hands. But at the same time, I feel like I don't want to say he's losing a step, but he clearly is not what he once was. Say when the Eagles won the Super Bowl the first time, or when they went to the Super Bowl or against the Chiefs the first time, and they won it a couple years ago. So I think it's interesting what teams will give up. I'd be surprised if the Eagles got back a first round pick. I think at most they're probably getting a second round pick. But if I'm a team like the Browns, if you're not really sold on any of these wide receivers at the top of the draft, why would you not send over, say, pick 39 or one of these second or third round picks that you have? I think that could be doable. So I think, but the point I'm trying to make is that there will be other suitors outside just the Patriots. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not the Eagles are going to get what they're looking for.
And I think there are a few other suitors for AJ Brown, and obviously they just don't get reported. And we can thank the whole Diana Rossini, Mike Vrabel, whatever's going on for that. We're not going to talk about that topic personally because I don't want to say I don't care about it enough. It's just not something I feel as if I should talk about. It's also already been talked about by everybody else and their mothers. So we understand what happened there with Rossini and Vrabel supposedly, and it kind of checks out when Rossini randomly out of nowhere reports to begin with that the Patriots want AJ Brown, and so on and so forth. So moving on from that aspect of it, um, I do think there are other AFC suitors in particular. Like I think the Bills would like AJ Brown. I think the Browns would like AJ Brown, right? I think there's several teams in the AFC specifically who would take AJ Brown. I also think the Eagles, if they move him, want to move him out of conference so they don't have to play him, which is fair. I totally understand that. A lot of organizations operate that way. But I'm also a fan of getting the best offer available as well. Um, so you kind of have to find that middle ground with it. I know the Eagles tried to offer a nice package for Micah Parsons, and obviously, knowing the history between the Eagles and Cowboys, Jerry Jones did not elect to move him there. But Micah did say that it almost happened that where he was going to be in an Eagles uniform. So I'll be curious to see what happens with the whole AJ Brown debacle. Jalen Hurts actually just posted today on his Instagram. I think for the first time in 9 months, as this news of AJ Brown broke. So we can read into that however we want to between Hurts and Brown. Not really my point. Um, but it's typical receiver stuff. You know, receivers want the ball. Running back, you know, any skill position wants the ball. It's just a little bit more intensified with receivers. Uh, it just bothers me a little bit that they like to be like that. I mean, while I understand it, it is um, upsetting. But um, what teams do you think need to win this draft or need to hit on the most of their picks to kind of take that next step forward? Who are those teams that you think could trade some picks if they need to as well to move up in the draft and maybe make some noise?
Yeah, I think the three teams that really come to mind are the Raiders, the Titans, and the Browns. I look at all these teams that are going to have young quarterbacks. Uh, the Browns are a bit of an exception. So the Raiders and the Titans, they spent a lot of money in free agency. And you got new coaches coming in. Is the Titans example? You've got a second year quarterback who you're looking to put more talent around, which they've already done, going out and getting Wandale Robinson, going out and adding to your team. And both those teams spent big. Those teams, you're not spending money to go through year two of a rebuild or to continue, a transition year. No, you're spending money in free agency because you think you can win. And that's what the Raiders did. They went out, they spent record setting money for Tyler Linderbaum. They went out and spent a ton of money on the defense. And to their credit, I liked a lot of the signings that they made. I think it made a lot of sense. And I think the Raiders are going to try and just plop in Fernando Mendoza, draft some more talent around him, and see where you go. But obviously, if they can do that, I think they'll be able to win some games. I think the Titans will be able to win some games. We know Cam Ward has the raw talent to be able to compete, and you just need a little bit of help around him. And then as for the Browns, I mean, they've got a ton of picks as well. On top of the draft that they already had last year, if they can repeat that, I think they're going to be much more competitive this year. So I look at the Raiders, Titans, and Browns as three teams that have the ammunition to make a big splash in this draft. And kind of given the trajectory that they've gone this offseason, I think they could be in for a big hit.
I think for me, the team, obviously with the Giants having their two picks now, I think they can become a big winner in the definitely first part of this draft, in particular round one. I do think there are a few teams that have enough picks to make enough noise to win the whole thing, right? So, like the Eagles have a boatload of picks. The Rams have two first round picks for the first time in like forever. So, what are the Rams going to do? I think that's definitely something to keep in mind, especially with the very rambunctious offseason Puka Nakua has had. Do they take receiver? Do they trade up? Do they get an offensive skill weapon? I think the Browns with the two first round picks, We'll see what they do, but they're going to be a team that kind of needs to hit on these picks as well. I'm trying to think of some other teams. I think bringing in Robert Saleh and Brian Dable does a lot of the work for you, but now you need to bring in some of the pieces that they need. So I do think the Titans are a team as well who needs to have a good draft. I think the Jets gotta have a good draft here. I mean, you have the second pick. You cannot miss on that pick. They've missed a lot in the last few years and dating several years back as well on these very early picks. They have not had the best track record with them. So I think it's important for the Jets to also make some noise, capitalize, do something that's gonna like pop. Um, I'm trying to think of some other teams. It's just I think this is going to be a draft that has a lot of trades and a lot of movement. That's been reported that that might happen as well, but I think there's so much high end talent and probably the top 10ish picks. You're going to see a lot of teams calling to try to get into probably that, back half of it, maybe like that 7 to 12 range and try to get somebody. I do think that's going to happen. Also, rarely we don't have a very QB dominated first round, so that might shake things up as well. Are we going to see more defensive players go off the board than we typically do? Because we know how this works when you get the quarterbacks and the rally starts going there and they all start going off. It slides a lot of those guys down, and you get all of a sudden you're sitting at pick 20, and a guy you didn't think would make it out of the top 10 is sitting at 17, and you trade up and you get him. So I'll be fascinated to see what happens with the trading up, trading down, but then also uh, what are going to be the surprise picks? What teams are going to be like, oh, wow, they drafted this guy. Why did they draft him? Like that's the unique part about the draft every year that we as Americans love. Uh, we love to call certain sports or certain things American pastimes, but the NFL draft is one of those. And without it, I don't know what football fans would do because, well, football fans are a very unique human being. I'll just put it like that. So, with that, I mean, what other thoughts do you have, I guess, before we get into the closing part of our podcast? It could be the NFL, it could be the NBA playoffs, it could be the Browns, whatever way you want to take it, we'll take it that way.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the trades. I have a hard time seeing many teams looking to trade up in this draft outside of the Cowboys, who could be looking to make a big splash and go and get a big defensive star to try, especially considering that there's a couple of division rivals ahead of them. I don't really know what other teams are looking to trade up, right? And what players are you trading up for? Because, in my opinion, if you're giving up assets to trade up and go and get a guy, it's got to be a guy that you see extreme value on. So I really only see two players in this draft that I would trade up for given they fall. Maybe three. Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs, and Sonny Styles. And one of those is going to go early. Likely two of them are going to go early. So maybe one of those guys falls out of the top 7 or 8. And if that's the case, then maybe the Cowboys trade up. Maybe another team trades up for Jeremiah Love if he falls a little bit. But I just think it's going to be tough. Nobody. It seems like no team really wants to give up draft capital in next year's draft, given the quarterbacks that are going to be there. Jeremiah Smith is going to be in that draft. Ryan Williams will be in that draft. It's going to be a loaded draft. Cam Coleman as well. Going to be a ton of weapons, ton of quarterbacks. So it just seems like this year, it seems like teams are playing it a bit safer. Like I know the Browns are looking to trade back, but really maybe only one suitor that's looking to jump up. So I don't necessarily know if we're going to see as many trades as originally once thought. I feel like a lot of teams could just kind of stay where they're at, see who falls, and kind of just end up taking best player available if that's kind of how it shakes out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to, as always, there's going to be something that happens that shocks us. Maybe there's a trade for somebody that's on a team right now, and we just go, "Oh my, so and so just got traded," right? Like when the Eagles did trade for AJ Brown way back when, and the Titans moved in, took Traylon Burks, and we saw how that ended. But something is brewing somewhere, and a lot of times we may not know it. So it's just something to keep in mind. I do think another team I didn't mention, and this might be the last thing I say, but the Colts are a team that is moved off a lot of their veteran pieces, a lot of their locker room leadership. here this offseason, and they have some looming holes that they need to fill if they want to try to get back into some sort of state of contention. And I think they're in one of the relatively easier divisions to compete in, being the AFC South. And by saying that, I don't mean the teams are bad within that division. It's more so none of those teams ever. Jacksonville is kind of the exception to this from last year, but more times than not, we don't see the teams out of the AFC South winning 12, 13, 14 games. It doesn't normally happen. They're usually on the lower end winning max 11, but you're going to see them competing for the division title with about 10 wins, maybe 9 wins, potentially 11 like I said. So, I think the Colts being in that situation, I think they have a chance to get back into the thick of things in the division, and then you can obviously make the playoffs through your division. But they got to do a good job in this draft because I feel like there's a lot of pressure on their organization, on their coaching staff as well to make make amends meet and honestly not waste the entire career of Jonathan Taylor. It feels like so. It's just another thing to keep in mind as well with the Colts. There's a few other teams that I think need this draft as well. Um, I'll be curious to see what the Bucks do to replace Mike Evans. Obviously, they have a very deep receiver room already, so maybe they don't actually go get a receiver at all. But maybe the Bucks go and they get active. They try to get a receiver. It's possible. Uh, there are teams that have holes, right? The Steelers basically don't have a quarterback right now. I mean, Will Howard is their QB1. What do they do? Do they take a mid round swing on somebody? Do they try to move up and get a Ty Simpson or somebody? So we'll see. I'll be curious as we near the NFL draft on Thursday. Later tonight, hopefully when this post, if not tonight, it'll be tomorrow night. But we've got game twos taking place in the NBA playoffs. So if we do have a second episode this week, it will be Friday. We'll recap round one of the draft, and then we will also go over what will be the game twos and potentially game threes that may have taken place in the time that we have been absent. But if that doesn't happen, we'll just come back next week, do the exact same thing, recap as much of round one as possible, and then also the entire NFL draft and the moves that were made. But with that being said, that will conclude episode 27 of Beyond the Box Score. Trayvon Hastings and Joey Korzanowski here as always. Want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode with us. And if you guys could like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever it is you do on the various platform you do it from. If it's a repost, if it's a share, if it's a comment, don't care, do it. We love the interaction. The interaction helps our reach as well, our algorithm. So with that being said, that's going to conclude it. We'll catch you guys in the next one and stay tuned for recap moving forward.